morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the meeting. Rabbi Kamalet, acting chair, call for the virtual residential and manufacturing structural board meeting October 7, 2020, to the order at 9:30. Melissa or Debbie, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Chair Rabbi Tamer Halet.
Aye.
Gordon Anslow.
Here.
James Austin. Forrest Barnes.
Here.
John Camiller.
Here.
Rich Fry.
Here.
Emily Kemper.
Here.
Doug Lathine. Rich Tover. Excused. Eli Fulham.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item in the agenda is the approval of the agenda and the order of business. Members, do you have any discussion on this item? I, acting chair, Rabbi Kamalet, will the agenda and the order of business approved. The next item is the we have the draft note of the last notice, the meeting in September 16, 2002. Are there any errors or correction to the minute I distributed?
Chair Tamara Holt, this is John Cameller. I'm interested in all the different spellings of my last name in the minutes. I'm used to some of that, but this was a new one.
Okay. I have some problem. Okay.
We will correct that. Our apologies, Mr. Camiller. Thank you.
I'm asking the addition to the draft minutes, September 16, 2020, are fine. Next meeting is scheduled for January 6 to 2021. Next item is public comment. Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Andy Bolton, policy analyst with the division. We have no requests for general public comment, but there is several requests for public comment related to specific agenda items, and we will address those when we reach those agenda items.
Thank you. Next item is the report. Tony?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Tony Rocco with the division. Just a brief update for the board today, since we have quite a full agenda. Our division posted several clarifications this week regarding the solar ready provision that this board approved at the September meeting just a couple of weeks ago. And then we also re-notified folks that are signed up for division updates of that clarification. So that went out. And then also, our division plans to kick off the REACH code process at the next Construction Industry Energy Board meeting on October 20th. So just wanted to put that out there for you. The residential energy portions from that process will be brought before this board at a future meeting. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Item 4, communication, we have none. Item 5, appeals, none. Item 6, unfinished business, we have none. Item 7, new business. We have 3 items for the, to discuss today and to decide. And I give the word to Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Andy Bolton, Policy Analyst of the Division. The first item up is the structural design, fire, life safety code revisions recommended coming out of the code committee that the board appointed in July. Discussions went through August, and the matrix in your board packet outlines the recommendations for these provisions, and we have Chief Rocco on hand to discuss the technical details of the recommendation. Sorry, we also have some folks signed up for public comment on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Tony Rocco with the division. So before you, item 7A, we have the matrix that is included in your board packet, and my plan was just to go through and talk about each one of those significant change items. Then we have some summaries of insignificant items, kind of by chapters, sort of in chunks behind those significant items. So that's my plan, to just kind of go through one by one. If any board member has a question, please stop me and let me know, and we can take a closer look or a broader discussion for any one of those items. So at your pleasure, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to begin.
Yeah.
So the first item, item 1, on the matrix is section R301.1.3. This is just a clarification in the code. So we know that the residential code is a prescriptive code. However, it allows you to design buildings that maybe don't fit into that prescriptive application. So that section of the code is the provision that permits engineered design, and it kicks over to our OSSC for that engineered design, since the engineering standards are adopted through that promulgation process. This is just a clarification, not a technical change, really just a simple addition within the existing language to clarify, make it easier for folks to identify when they need to go over to that OSSC for the provision or for the design of the building in question. Number 2, we have the climatic and geographic design criteria. There's going to be several. The next several matrix items are related to this. And this specific one in number 2 was regarding section R301.2 and specifically the climatic and geographic design table. So long-standing here in Oregon, we've had a very useful table right up front in chapter 3 that identifies county locations, and then it identifies associated design criteria for each one of those locations. This is basically just clarifying that table based on the other recommended actions below. So we can kind of go through this as a package. It's 2 through 5, and then it also rolls over onto number 7. And I'll be referring back to this table. So basically it's just an update of that table. One thing to note there is captured in your matrix. At the August 3rd committee meeting, the committee requested that the division staff look a little bit closer at the frost depth requirement for Multnomah County, and we came back, brought some information to the committee, and it was the proposed changes for Multnomah County were approved by the committee at the 17th meeting. So it was something that was brought up by one of the co-chairs of the committee, and it was a correction that needed to occur within that table. So item 3 gets into the wind design criteria, and as you know, we have the Oregon map that identifies wind zones throughout our state, and this change would basically take the same map that would apply for a risk category 2 structure, a standard structure under the OSSC, and apply that same mapping to the ORSC. So it essentially uses the shape files from ASCE 716, and it will overlay our state map. So it becomes just a quick check through some referenced tools that are available online to determine your actual site-specific wind zone. And then there's some guidance and some additional language within that that goes into how to identify the wind design criteria. Number 4 is section R301.2.1, and this is a provision that has been removed in Oregon historically, and we've received a lot of inquiries from the industry over the past few years about why it had been removed. It is the component and cladding load table, and what this does essentially is this identifies some criteria for certain very limited number of building components that must meet that wind design for the component and cladding load. So now the committee has recommended to include it in the code. The one nice thing, you'll see there is a fiscal impact potential identified, but the one nice thing is that the vast majority of manufacturers of these products already comply with this because it's been in the model code for a long time. So they already specify it in their evaluation services report, in their installation instructions. It's something they're well aware of, but it would be something that would be new to our Oregon Residential Specialty Code. Number 5, determination of seismic design category. So very similar to wind, long-standing, historically we've had a statewide map in Oregon that details the various seismic design categories. And in the past, just after the seismic zone maps went away, it became kind of a county-by-county basis statewide map. And so when we look at this, what was before the technical review committee was essentially 3 options that we provided to them. And those options are summarized for you in the matrix. And the committee chose to, after quite a bit of discussion, chose to approve option 1. And option 1 is adopt the model code provisions and amend them only to clarify and streamline the process of obtaining a site-specific seismic design category based on the latest National Seismic Hazard Modeling maps. And so what this does is it takes the exercise of determining your seismic design category, instead of just looking at the map and kind of going on this county by county non-scientific basis, you now would just do a real quick check and it will give you your actual seismic design category on a site-specific basis. It also brings back in seismic design category D0, which has been removed from the ORSC since the I codes came in place. And then it also brings in seismic design category B as Bravo into our state, which historically did not exist, but again on the national level, based on the latest science, it does exist in the eastern part of our state. One additional thing, there are small portions of seismic design category E, ECHO, that appear on the coast of Oregon, the southern coast, and then also there's a portion in Lincoln County as well. And that would be something that would be part of the discussion when the seismic design category goes through that determination on a site-specific basis. You'll also know, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that there is a potential cost reduction for most locations, and then again, those coastal areas that I noted in the seismic design category E may see a slight increase in design and construction costs. Essentially what the code does is it allows you to design to a seismic design category D2, even when you're located in E, as long as you satisfy certain parameters, and those parameters have to do with irregular allowances, so offsets, braced wall line, exterior walls not being in the same plane, things like that. Some of those allowances are not permitted in seismic design category E. Moving on, number 6, irregular buildings This is just a simple, non-technical change. So what we propose to the committee is including those irregular building illustrations from the model code commentary that have actually been really helpful. We've sent them to a lot of customers in the past when they're asking about, application of a certain irregularity. So we felt that it was going to be helpful to any code reader to have them actually in line with the code text that explains these irregularities. So again, non-technical change, just more illustrations in the code. Item 7 is regarding snow load. So again, as I mentioned earlier, item 7 kind of ties back to that, the R301.2 discussion and climatic and geographic design criteria. So as you know, currently under the ORSC, snow loads are identified in that tabular format, and then we also have a footnote that applies to the entire table that references the snow load analysis published by SEAO, and then also some interim updates that they issued to that, and I believe those white paper updates came in 2013. So currently it's captured as a footnote. However, on the OSSC side, during promulgation of the 19 OSSC, that board elected to align with our existing statewide alternate method that allows the use of the mapping tool that's also hosted by SEAO, I think with support from Oregon State University. And so this proposal that went in front of the committee and the committee recommendation is to basically align with that. So if we're obtaining ground snow loads for an ORSC governed structure, we're obtaining ground snow loads just the same as we would for an OSSC structure. So a lot of consistency there, and that's what number 7 gets at. And then all of the code language will support, how to use that tool, and then also any adjustments for site-specific elevation differences. Number 8. Several pieces to number 8, and there was quite a bit of committee discussion on this item, and I think it was because there were multiple pieces involved. So the first item is a clarification regarding attached decks, and attached decks being treated as a projection for the purposes of determining fire separation distance. That's something that has been an ICC model code interpretation for many years now, and it's something that we felt was necessary to codify into the code, and that's why we brought it to the committee, and they agreed. The second part there is regarding something that the ORSC does not specifically contemplate, which is multiple detached dwellings on a single lot. And so as we know, this is becoming a lot more popular and more common. And so we were basically just establishing some minimum criteria about each detached dwelling on a single lot that they would need to at least evaluate that fire separation distance for each dwelling independently. And as you know, here in Oregon, that it requires a 3-foot distance to a property line or to an assumed line between two buildings on the same lot, for a total distance of 6 feet between two detached dwellings. And the last thing there was regarding a footnote about a potential sprinkled building trade-off related to fire separation distance, and that was disapproved by the committee. So as you note there, the August 3rd note on the matrix there within that column, the committee disapproved the proposal to add a footnote D, and that's what that is capturing. So quite a few moving parts there, but we got hopefully the clarification added into the code for your consideration. Item 9 was regarding section R302.2 townhouse provision. So historically here in Oregon, we've had a very robust and proven townhouse prescriptive path, and this basically was a couple of things. Clarifications throughout that section of the code. One of our team members, Eric, has done a really great job on updating those illustrations, those townhouse illustrations that I'm sure you're all familiar with, that have been around since the task or the Appendix O task force work long time ago. So updating those, and then we also wanted to reintroduce the utility separation language that was part of the up to the 2014 ORSC. And it was inadvertently omitted from the printing. And if you recall, it was from when we removed the co-signing of maintenance agreements and that language. The separation of utilities was embedded within that language, and so inadvertently it was removed. So that's part of the 3022 kind of suite of changes, is reintroducing that, and the committee looked at the exact language for that, for identifying that separate utilities must be provided, and that you cannot run utilities either under, beneath an adjacent townhouse or through the attic of an adjacent townhouse. 302.3, you'll notice in the first column there on your matrix under the number column, it is denoted by an asterisk. This was something that the committee kind of added on the fly to the discussion, and I think it was great, great addition. And basically the question that was being addressed here, or the code issue, was that what happens when we have a detached two-family dwelling that is separated by a real property line? So in the past, historically, what you look at that as like a zero lot line. You look at it as two independent, detached, single-family dwellings with a zero lot line, and so they're required by code to have a 1-hour ASTM E119 UL 263 wall on either side of that property line, so two total walls. However, when you're building a two-family dwelling, of course, we know Section R302.3 allows you to do a single ASTM E119 UL 263 wall for that separation. So this was basically addressing what happens if we're separated by a property line. And so new language was put in place that clarifies the separation there at the line would require those two independent 1-hour walls, and that you would still be able to have them structurally connected with roofing materials, etc., which is typically how they are designed. So really good clarification there. We brought the language back to the committee, and committee approved the proposed language on the 17th of August. Item 10, section R310.
Excuse me, the caller who just joined the call. Will you please mute your mic? Caller 6, the caller who just joined the call. Who just joined the call just now? Hello? Please mute your mic. Thank you so much.
Okay, continuing on, item number 10, we have section R310 regarding emergency escape and rescue openings, and basically this was just a clean fix adopting the model code allowance, which aligns with a long-standing interpretation that our division has had, and that's regarding basically the replacement of glazing where you're not changing a structural member, and this model code just aligns with our long-standing stance, which is you can absolutely change that existing egress window, even though it doesn't meet the requirements of today, as long as you're not making the opening less compliant than it was, so same opening area, etc. So again, just common sense code change, pretty straightforward there. Number 11, R311.7. So this is proposing to adopt new IRC language that just clarifies that any stairway serving the dwelling, even if it's not the means of egress stairway, is required to be constructed to the same dimensional uniformity, the same geometrical design. And this was one that came up quite a few times. In the past, we've contacted ICC senior staff several times about it. We have written opinions from them about it. And basically all it's just clarifying is that if you have a stair that serves an attached deck, that stair should follow the same provisions for stairs that are in section R311, because as written under the current code, the 17 iteration and prior iterations, you could not cite the R311 standards for a non-means of egress stair. So again, just clean up clarification, trying to kind of close the loop on that one. Items number 12 and 13. This is a model code allowance that we recommended disapproval of, and the committee agreed and approved the disapproval for numerous reasons. So this is dealing with alternating tread devices and ship's ladders being permitted to serve an area, a habitable area, small habitable area. And the reasons for the disapproval, obviously the legislature has occupied the field regarding small homes and alternating tread devices used for means of egress purposes. There's also no testing or scientific support that we were aware of or able to find. And the IRC assumes the presence of automatic sprinklers in all of these structures that are allowed to have these alternating tread devices or ship's ladders. So that was a good discussion at the committee level, and they agreed that it did not have a place in the ORSC. R312.2.1 regarding window sills. This was something that the committee kind of brought up, and it has to do with fall protection requirements. So in the past, as you know, in section R312, the fall protection was moved to the guard provisions, and it basically says that fall protection is required if your window's within a certain distance to the finished floor on the inside of the room, and then on the outside of the window, on the exterior side of the building, if you have a fall greater than 72 inches to grade or other surface below. Well, it has been interpreted by some that maybe even a sloping roof or an eyebrow roof could be considered another surface below, and that it would prevent you from measuring down 72 inches and then therefore triggering the requirement for the presence of the ASTM F2090 device or similar. And so this was discussed quite a bit. Again, something that was put on the agenda by the committee, and they just added some clarifying language to clarify that only if it's a flat surface below of a minimum width, basically, of what's required of a landing, could you use that for the measurement and not taking the measurement all the way down to grade to determine if you were over the 72 inches. So a good one there. R318, number 14, moisture control. And this was something, again, as you know, the R318 provisions were part of that construction claims task force work. Quite a few code changes came out of the construction claims task force. And this one is just, again, just adding an option that appears in the model code. And that is for the use of a class 3 vapor retarder for framed walls when vented cladding is installed over wood structural panels, or continuous air impermeable insulation is applied on exterior above grade wall surfaces. So again, just some flexibility. The code provisions in 318 otherwise stay the same, and then this model code allowance is proposed to be added to that to the existing language. Section R320 really wasn't an actionable item. It was just more of a discussion about accessibility and statutory authority here, and how ORS 447-220 addresses affected buildings and what that includes, places of public accommodations, and then what exemptions are included under public accommodations. So again, a very limited application of accessibility standards under the ORSC, unless you have maybe single-story townhouses, at least 4 or more. So this was more of just kind of a clarification that the guest room language that is adopted in the IRC would not be able to be adopted here in Oregon, and the committee agreed. R324 regarding solar energy systems, this is basically just a pointer provision, and it's aligning closer with the model code. So what we do in R324 now is basically send folks back to Chapter 9 for those building integrated photovoltaic panels, such as roof coverings, and then also a pointer back to Chapter 23, where there's more additional information on both solar thermal and PV systems. Number 17, habitable attic. This was a great change, and this was something in our proposed language that we took the direct comments from the City of Portland regarding the habitable attics, And what this allows is, a habitable attic essentially to not be considered a story, which is really helpful in design just from a general standpoint, because it identifies, when you consider bracing methodologies, are you considering that first story the bottom of a two-story, or is it just a one-story building with a habitable attic? That's not considered a story. So, but there's also some bookends on it. So when you put a habitable attic above a third story, and the habitable attic is not considered a story, then you are required to have a NFPA 13D sprinkler system throughout the home. And that was something that came through at the model level for the 2021 IRC, again, that Terry and his staff brought to our attention, that we included in the proposal. So I think the committee was very satisfied with that provision and including it into the code. Item number 18, wildfire hazard mitigation. Again, this was just pointing out that we wanted to take that interim amendment that we had under the 2017 ORSC and actually publish it in the body of the code. And that was, again, a big work group, came up with the language that is in R327 currently as an insert page. And so now we would just have it published in the code, which would be great. R328, Rural and Remote Task Force work, and this is something that basically allows an allowable area increase, very similar to what we know of in Chapter 5 of the OSSC, but specifically for accessory structures that are accessory to a dwelling. And again, for rural and remote areas where maybe they don't have the opportunity to provide sprinklers in these accessory buildings to get these increases kind of under typical OSSC application. So this has been in place through that rural and remote task force work, and staying in that same location towards the end of Chapter 3. R329, item number 20 on your matrix, swimming pools, spas, and hot tubs. Long-standing, we've had Appendix G here in Oregon, and what we proposed to do was get away from Appendix G and rescind it, since it was rescinded at the model level 2 iterations ago, and then point to the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code as the model code does for compliance of the design. And that would also be for the barrier compliance. One great thing is that this allows the power safety cover option for folks, where the current Appendix G does not have that. So on the model code level for a long time, they have allowed a powered safety cover to serve in lieu of a physical barrier. So good change there, good recommendation. 23, 408.3, unvented crawl space. This was more of a clarification regarding those counties subject to mandatory radon mitigation. In the 17 ORSC, when the unvented crawl space language was specifically introduced, there was question at the time at the committee level about those counties where radon mitigation is required, and at the time it was specifically a carve out that they cannot do an unvented crawl space in those areas. We received a lot of input, information from stakeholders about that in industry, and so basically what we're doing there is just allowing a potential path for a building official to accept an unvented crawl space with that continuous mechanical ventilation system to run in parallel with either a passive or active radon mitigation system. And so that's the change that you see there in item number 23. 24, really straightforward, lots of good stuff there. The model code level, as you all probably know, they've been building the deck provisions over the last several cycles, and that the basis for those prescriptive deck provisions is AWC's DCA 6. So they're designed for code acceptance 6. They have a really good deck guide. They've had it for a long time, and now ICC has been pulling that in at the national level, and we're looking to do the same here for Oregonians. 25, R6029, regarding cripple walls. Big clarification on this one, and this is something that we've discussed quite a bit amongst our team and also with ICC senior and engineering staff. and then also with many of our local government partners and building officials. And this is basically a clarification that is already approved and will be printed in the 2021 ORSC regarding cripple walls, and that the requirement for sheathing when you have a shorter cripple wall. And the clarification there is that it's only talking about exterior cripple walls. It's talking about cripple walls on that perimeter foundation. It is not talking about interior cripple walls that are used oftentimes in our region for splitting spans, right? So for splitting floor joist spans, etc. So really good clarification there, and a big potential cost reduction for those builders who use that interior cripple or pony wall to split spans. Item number 26, 70311, some more construction claim task force work. This is talking about the drainage plane, of course, that we have here in Oregon, and really it just is dealing with one of the exceptions that we get a lot of questions about the application, because it's very close to a model exception. And so this is just clarifying that if you're using that exception to get out of the drainage plane provision, which you can, that it's much more robust than at the model level, because at the model level they don't have the drainage plane requirement that we do have here in Oregon, which is pretty state-of-the-art, kind of leading the industry on that. And so we're just clarifying that you would have to use the entire assembly. So you need to use exterior wall coverings, you need to use the windows that are going to be in there, you need to use the doors that are going to be in there to have that tested properly, to actually go through and use the ASTM standard noted in the exception. 27, PV shingles and building integrated PV. These two items appear in Chapter 9 because they're really basically just considered roof coverings. And that's why they appear in Chapter 9 with everything else, with our asphalt shingles, with everything else in there. And so, again, the proposal was just to add these in as the model code captures them, and clearly make them an allowance. And then we also, again, have that pointer from Chapter 3 as well back to the provisions in Chapter 9. 28, roof recover, or re-roofing as we commonly refer to it. The change here is that we recommended rescinding the longstanding Oregon amendment that allowed you to do 3 layers of roofing. So a single layer installed with the construction of the home, and then 2 layers of overlay. And as all of you know, I'm sure most roofing companies don't do that anyways. And they will remove everything existing before they replace the new layer of roofing. And oftentimes manufacturers' installation instructions are driving that action because they won't warranty their product being overlaid over what they don't know of existing condition of an existing roof. So good clarification there. It still does allow 1 overlay, and that is in alignment with the model code IRC. 29, Appendix T, dwelling unit fire sprinklers. So long-standing, we have had an appendix that basically captured NFPA 13D and P2409, I think it is, or 2404, from the IRC, and it was regarding fire sprinklers in dwellings. And so what we proposed to the committee and what the committee recommended and agreed with was to remove Appendix T. Obviously, there's some maintenance requirements that kind of go into maintaining that appendix as an Oregon-only appendix. We have to make sure it aligns with the other portions of the code. And also, NFPA 13D is the standard. It's widely available. It's available for free online, free viewing. And so the committee agreed that that made the most sense, just to default to the 13D national standard. And then item 30, this was a courtesy discussion regarding existing statewide alternate methods, portal frame bracing 9701 and wall bracing 1301. And our recommendation was to rescind both of these methods. So the wall bracing method allows the 2008 ORSC to be used. And this is something that comes up quite often, are the differences between that 08 method and the current code today. And I'd welcome any more discussion on that one moving forward. And the committee approved to rescind both of those existing statewide alternate methods. Then that gets us to the insignificant changes, and at the pleasure of the board, I can just kind of run through these really fast. We can stop on anything specific. This kind of captures, a model code clarifications for each chapter, and then it also captures existing Oregon amendments and what they address. So at the pleasure of the chair, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to just continue on, just high-level summary on these insignificant changes?
Do we have although we can hear Trey if you have any comments, and Mike related to this item?
This is Gordon Ansel. I have one question. It's regarding item 8, number 302.1, having to do with separation from multiple dwelling units on a single lot. Can I ask a question on this? This kind of refers to the presumption when you're putting multiple detached dwellings on a single lot that you separate them by 6 feet, which essentially is driven by the sort of assumption of an assumed property line 3 feet distant from each the exterior wall of the buildings that are abutting each other. And I at least have considerable experience in Eugene with similar situations where there has been an allowance in the past to presume a location of an assumed property line and then apply to buildings on either side of it, the code mandated requirements regarding exterior wall protection and openings, whether they can be there or protected or whatever. Just a quick question on this is there a provision that one can, rather than just maintaining the 6 feet, and this always gets into the difficulty of adding buildings on a single site, is there a provision that one can presume a lot line between the buildings? And let's just say that the lot line is presumed to be at the face of one building, but 3 feet distant from say an existing building, so that you put all of the higher burden on the newly constructed building without making one come back and do a bunch of retrofit to the other building. And the only reason I bring this up is that these add a unit things, which I think there's lots of public support for and lots of reason why it's a good idea to cram in as many units as you possibly can to help, with our housing crisis. Is there that flexibility? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Ansel, great question. So yes, there is that flexibility, and it comes in the definition of fire separation distance. So if you look at the definition, it captures basically an assumed line. It doesn't say where. So very similar to what you're familiar with under Chapter 5 of the OSSC. You can assume that line, wherever you want. The other kind of wild card in this is that obviously land use has a determination to make, and they're the ones that determine any necessary setbacks or anything. This is just for the construction requirements, as you noted. So yes, absolutely. In the situation you described, you could propose the assumed line wherever you saw it necessary. Thank you.
No, thank you for that answer. And just an observation, and I'll stop here. But that's in my experience in local jurisdictions that a lot of what you find, even in land use stuff, actually it seems to be sort of set up to defer to the fire and life safety aspect of it. So this is a nice piece of flexibility. Anyway, thank you for the answer.
Great, thank
you. Tony, I was members. Do you want Tony give you more about the small changes? Or we can hear from Cherry and Mike. I think because one of the Mike's oral testimony has a part of this, of item 2A. So with these numbers, you want to have Tony continue for discussion on the minor items, or just go to Mike and Terry?
Through the chair, this is John. Go ahead.
Rich.
Yeah, this is John Camiller. I would just as soon proceed ahead without going through the minor items. I think they are by definition minor items and don't require a big discussion. Thank you.
Rich?
I would second that.
Okay. All right. Let's listen to Terry or Mike. Because Terry, you have anything to add to Tony, or we can go to Mike?
So this is Terry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Can you repeat the question again? What's the topic on?
We are at item 7A, and do you have any oral testimony or?
No, I mostly signed up so that people had questions or anything about what the committee said, because I'm very supportive of what the committee's done.
Okay, then go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair Tamerhulet and the board. My name is Mike Goodrich. I work with Legend Homes. I was a co-chair of the Technical Code Committee, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Oregon Home Builders Association. We submitted written testimony on both items 7A and 7B, in particular on 7A around the retiring of the portal frame bracing and wall bracing SAMs. OHBA supports this code package that the Technical Committee has brought to the board. We would like to see it approved today. We had asked for relief due to hardships on the industry from the COVID-19 pandemic, the wildfire smoke, a number of things that have impacted our industry for some time, to train our members, disseminate some more information, and make sure that we can implement 3 measures properly, and 2 of those are under 7B. So, but specific to that, after some additional conversations, we came to the conclusion that we had kind of missed the point, that asking for deferral of implementation of specific measures didn't take into consideration that this was a package, and that created unintended consequences with the rest of the code. So we would still appreciate the committee considering, and we can talk more about this under 7B, providing some relief time to implement training for some of these measures, but we're not asking for that year to 18 months that was in our testimony specific to matrix item number 30. So other than that, we do support the work of the Technical Committee and thank them for the hard work.
Thank you. So, number
Through the chair, this is John Camiller. Mike, I wonder if you would give a little bit more expansion on what you mean by trainings. Are you talking about just people updating their current house plans and that kind of stuff? I mean, give us a little more specifics. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Miller. In specific to the portal frame bracing and wall bracing, after the committee decision agreeing with the division to retire those SAMs, we had considerable feedback from member builders and designers who had a lot of stock plans and inventory and in use that used those SAMs. And they told us that right now they were still working out how to work out of their home offices, that things were extremely busy, and they wanted more time to be able to convert those plans and their processes to comply with the model code bracing provisions. So that was in relation to the structural. We've got a little more detail in relation to the energy ones, and I won't get into it too far, but a couple of the provisions on the energy side, while valuable and widely employed in the builders using third-party programs right now, will take training to do properly by builders who haven't been in those programs before. And whether that comes from the division or whether that comes from the third-party providers or whether that comes through the industry, we'd certainly like to be a part of providing some of that training. But it should occur to avoid unintended consequences in the future. So that was our reason in requesting the delays.
Okay, and there'll be some more discussion under the energy conservation part.
That's my assumption. If the chair and the board would like me to address it now, I'd be happy to.
We can address it to when we get to item B. Any more discussion or questions to BTD staff?
Yeah, this is Eli Volum. I'd just like to say thank you again to Terry Whitehill, Mike Goodrich, and all the members of the committee for spending so much time going through all this stuff with Southern Coast Grid staff and putting together the recommendations. I think it's great to have that public input of subject matter experts. So just want to say thank you for your time.
Well, another comment. We have about 6 months before the adoption of the code, plus we have a grace period. I think it's plenty of time to make some changes to the plans and training. And at least we have about 6 months plus 3 months of grace period. We're looking at about 9 months from now. Do you think it's adequate, it's tonight to adjust within the 9 months?
Sorry, Chair, that question was to me.
Yeah.
We aren't sure if 9 months is sufficient for specific to the measure of the SAMs. For one thing, we haven't started any training yet, not having the code in place. The other is there's a massive disruption in our industry right now, and the focus simply has been trying to get more inventory out. We've got record low inventories in Oregon right now. We've got many of our builders and industry members that are working outside of their offices in normal programs. There's significant supply chain disruption, and we don't know when this will end. And frankly, we don't know when the next shoe will land. So we would like to see a delay beyond the an additional grace period, a delay in implementation, whatever that's called, just to provide at least next summer to get that training and information from our builders to give them a chance to update plans and systems and practices.
Any more discussion?
Yes, I guess I have a question to the board and to Mike. Just relative to the SAMs, on the energy side, I think we're up against a tougher timeline with 2023 zero energy ready equivalency. And if we defer training for that stuff, we're going to have less time to train for the next jump. And that's a conversation for the next agenda item. But I guess what's the side of extending a delay and allowing these SAMs for a little bit longer?
Through the chair, this is Gordon Angelo. Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
I talked with an acquaintance who has a long-established kind of stock plan business. We don't use stock plans. We do everything in-house still. I know that a great amount of housing units get built, perhaps the bulk of them, and particularly ones that are more affordable, get done with stock plans. And since I was talking to this person on other matters, but I just queried him about this, about things that are going to impact the need for them to make changes to plans, not only perhaps on lateral measures, but also with regard to upcoming possible changes in the mechanical code about the placement of heating equipment and ducts within the envelope and all that. Without using the colorful language that I heard, this fellow expressed that he's kind of in desperate straits with people sick and hard to do work and under a lot of pressure to get plans out, and essentially making an argument for God's sake, give us as much time as we can. It's all we can do to just sort of keep the product going out the door with reduced workforce. And I just want to just pass that on, that while I know that we're under the onus of meeting certain dates in the future, these are not normal times by any means. I can certainly vouch for that. And me personally, I come down on the side of acknowledging these are good things that we should probably do, but to understand that people in the trenches that do that work, i.e. get plans out that you can actually get a permit from that comply with the code, are feeling a lot of stress about adding on to their kind of current workload of going through and modifying their plans so they have something that they can sell to people and represent that you can get a permit for this and then it complies with the code. So that's just a report from the trenches. Thank you.
Through the chair, this is John Camiller. Here in Southern Oregon, 2 weeks ago, we lost 2,400 dwellings. And, there are so many things coming over the transom for us to do, just starting to get stuff cleaned up, to try and put our builders through a process right now of by April, which is probably the time frame when things will be cleaned and people will start trying to rebuild. To have everything redesigned, I can imagine that stock plans are going to be a pretty big part of the response. Now, to be fair, a lot of those dwellings were mobile homes and manufactured dwellings, so perhaps those members of the board might want to speak up, although it probably doesn't affect them. Well, it doesn't affect them, I guess. Anyway, adding one more wrinkle to the confusion and mass amount of work that has to happen in the short term to house the people of Southern Oregon, I would support at some level some kind of a way to not have to deal with this fairly new the whole redesign process of stock plans. And so maybe we can talk about it after we talk about the mechanical code issues, but if there was some way for the division to, without putting a delay in the current code, which perhaps makes the current the code in April that we would adopt, putting a delay in that would perhaps make it less effective than the current code. Maybe we could consider some kind of a delay of implementing the entire, approve the current code, but delay its implementation until October. And so perhaps the division could, in sometime today in their presentation, address that possibility and how that might affect complying with the governor's mandates. Thank you.
Hey, Tony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
This breaking is not really a part of the code. It's an alternate method, statewide alternate method.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, members of the board. So just real quick, to address part of Mr. Camiller's comments, the statewide alternate methods, we always just include them as a portion of kind of the code process because oftentimes they need to be updated with references and all of those things. So we, through all the committee processes over the years, we always include those. Same with interpretations, which just come from division staff. and actually don't have specific board action tied to them. Whereas the SAMs, the board approves the technical and scientific facts or merits of the statewide alternate method. But yeah, absolutely, these could, the rescinding of these two could be at some point later down the road. It's not tied to the 2021 ORSC specifically. So the code, you can silo it. The 2021 ORSC is this one thing, and then you have the statewide alternate methods that are being considered to be rescinded. Hopefully that helps.
Mr. Chair, this is Terry. Yeah, I think what Tony's saying is good. You know, I still think we should try to shoot for the April 1, but if we wanted, right now there'll be a 3-month grace period, which means they have until July 1. I would be supportive if that is to be extended, but I think we still need to move the code forward because there are some good things in there that people may want to use that code. And I think we also need to remember, I understand about the construction industry, but a lot of what we're doing is protecting the consumers, and it's related to the consumers too. So we need to keep that in mind also, that there may be things in there that they want to use. But like I say, I think I'm supportive of an extended grace period, but I'd still like to see us move forward because there's some really good things in this code that have changed that provide more flexibility and things that people can do. Thank you.
More discussion?
Yes, this is John Cameller again. By extending the grace period, I'm not sure what that might, what the reality, the actual real procedure is from a codes division perspective. Does that mean adopting the code today, but or approving the code today? I don't know the right words. Approving the code today, adopting it, but not making it mandatory for some longer period of time, like maybe till October. So it's my understanding and remembrance that once you adopt the code, in the period after adoption, it can be used, but it's not required to be used. So would you, by deferring, would you be extending that period of time where you could use either code? And that's a question. I'm not sure of it. Thank you.
Could I answer that question?
Yeah. Through the chair, this is Alana Cox from the division. And yes, certainly the grace period is incorporated into the rule that adopts the code. And so, you know, whatever code package is approved today would go through a rulemaking process. And then in that rule, it would make the code effective April 1 and then make it have a grace period. Generally, it's been 3 months, but if the board would like it to be some different period of time, 6 months, they could include that as well. So what might be the cleanest, you know, there are several ways to get there, would be to work through the code so we know what you're recommending to us on the code, and then make sure that at the end we have a discussion of timing for that code package. And so if the board would like that grace period to be extended, that could be a separate motion, and then we would just incorporate that into our rulemaking. So rather than it being April to July, it could be April to October, or whatever the board's pleasure is there.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Great.
Any more discussion? We need a motion for this item A, 7A, and we have either to approve as recommended, or approve with amendment, or disapprove.
Mr. Chair, this is John Cameller. I'd like to make a motion to approve with an amendment, and that amendment would be to extend the grace period. I think the correct word was from 3 months to 6 months, so that the requirements to use the code would not start in July, but rather would start in October.
Okay. Second.
And I think, and with the finding that the added.
I'm sorry, I think that he needed to add the wording there, but I was going to second.
Yeah, the added wording would be with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public or necessary to conserve scarce resources. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed that. I had to scroll over to it.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Yes, I will second that. Thank you.
Daniel, will you make a call the roll, please? Call the roll for vote.
Eli Volum,
John, quick question through the chair. Just if we have any discussion after this, just to clarify, we're just talking about the section A, and then we're going to be moving on to section B, and it could potentially have different timing. Is that a potential outcome here?
We didn't get to the next session yet.
So the motion here would be the grace period would just apply to this section of the code at this point.
But yes, right now this is what it is.
Thank you.
Through the chair, this is John. I made the motion. Is it, maybe we ought to ask the division, is it appropriate to adopt each of these sections, or is it, maybe there should just be one motion, I think is what the question was getting to.
Through the chair, this is Alana Cox again. It's fine to do it either way. You know, we would want a motion on this agenda item, which is the, you know, structural fire life safety code provisions. If you want to have the timing conversation for each or have that timing conversation together, is at the pleasure of the board. Either way is fine.
The way it's presented right now, each item has a motion. So what do you guys think that we do? We go to the next one and we make one motion, or?
Through the chair, Rich Fry. I think particularly we just go ahead with the motion that we've got when we move on to item B, that we go through it, and then if people want to have the same time frame on it, we just put that on. I think that makes everything clear and makes the trail complete.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Just one last comment. This is Eli Volum. I'm supportive of that too. I'd just like to share with my fellow board members that I don't know that I would support an extension on the energy side. So we would potentially have different parts of the code. And just as far as my perspective and what I'm willing to support, I just want to put that out there for discussion at this point. I don't know how others feel about it, but I agree with it for the SAM, but I'm not sure that I would for the energy. I need to hear discussion from the board and the public comment on that topic. Because on the energy side, we have a clear deadline, 2023, to get to some pretty aggressive stuff. I want to make sure that builders have plenty of time to not only achieve whatever we pass today, but the next level as well.
Okay, any more discussion? Melissa or Debbie, call roll for vote, please.
yes, Mr. Chairman. Eli Volum,
Approved.
Emily Kemper,
Approved.
Rich Fry,
Approved.
John Miller,
Approved.
Forrest Barnes,
Approved.
Gordon Anslow,
Approved.
Chair Rabbi Hemmerlet,
Approved.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 7B is mechanical and energy requirements for residential code to 2021. Andy Bolton, go ahead, for your presentation.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, representing the division, this is Mark Heizer, introducing the mechanical code change provisions that you'll find in your packet. Wanted to begin with just a little bit of kickoff. There's a lot of public comment that would like to come in, and there was a bit of general discussion at committee. We'd like to go through the list of the, with your permission, the 8 significant items and then come back for public comment on this, but wanted to kick off with a minor clarification about what is coming forward for a lot of discussion about whole house ventilation. If it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, would like to just give a little quick brief summary of what you're going to find in your packet as far as ventilation for homes. All right. One thing that where a lot of the confusion and based on what actually came out of the group is that a thing called whole house ventilation, running ventilation through the air 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, really came into the model codes in 2012. Oregon, because of a lot of things we've done with the Construction Claims Task Force, we have some specific amendments. We were waiting to bring in this as Oregon homes were getting better air sealed. One thing that is going to be part of a lot of the discussion today, and just want to give some clarification, is hearing about the standard ASHRAE 62.2, which is about one standard for residential ventilation. It does differ from the IRC model codes. Oregon, of course, has some exceptions and changes to the IRC model code that go above both the IRC and ASHRAE 62.2, such as bathroom exhaust quantities and so forth. 62.2, of course, it's really not part of the model code or the executive order, just there's some different discussions that happen. One part of this is as we are bringing in a requirement for all homes to run some air ventilation continuously. Baseline model code starts at exhaust-only ventilation. The division, through its recommendation and what was passed by the board, is to know where that makeup air is coming from, so that you have something pushing in for every bit that's getting sucked out of the home, which is called balanced ventilation, and we have a definition in the code for that. All of the standards, including 62.2, recognize that a balanced system provides better indoor air quality than exhaust only, so they normally allow less than would be allowed for exhaust only. The ORSC, the provisions before you, would provide better indoor air quality than the model code. And in addition to that, model codes and standards are finding that if you not only balance the air but distribute it, you get even better air quality. As part of that, we brought in was for the balanced ventilation. Again, we wanted to have that to avoid having things like were passed in Minnesota, where you pretty much have to start, because there's so much getting sucked out of the home, they had to start putting in requirements to poke holes in the home again. Also to provide better safety relative to radon, dust particles, increase when you don't know where the infiltration is coming from. It can increase other problems, including mold and possible higher formaldehyde readings. So what came forward is sort of, and some people commenters missed certain pieces here, is that via section R303.4, whole house ventilation is now required. Only natural ventilation is going away. The system must be a balanced one per section 1505.4. That means you need to have a system that can push in as much as being pushed or pulled out of the home to know, so that you know where the infiltration is coming, that makeup air is coming from. Via Chapter 11, the fans have to be efficient. We are using the IRC model code ventilation rates, which now have a formula in addition to a prescriptive table you can pick from. We brought in an allowance for balanced and distributed ventilation that's coming into the 2021 IRC language. There was some confusion. It does not require that the furnace run at the same time. It means that your fans that push in the air and the fans that are pulling out the air are interlocked so that you're getting that balanced ventilation at all times. One thing from model code is that you have to have an override switch so that a homeowner can choose to turn it off, say when they go on vacation, they can shut it off, or when you have something like a high smoke event like we had recently, it allows you to button down the house a little better. So again, it has the IRC ventilation table and the extra equation. The ventilation reduction, again, is allowed if it can get distributed. Somehow it can get to the bedrooms and the main living area. This was done via a proposal from, believe it or not, the Building America program and Joe Stieberich. It's an option that helps people avoid having to duct ventilation directly into each bedroom by using the central furnace. Once again, we'll be here to take questions as it goes on. And again, at that point, just wanted to clarify about sort of the staging of the ventilation. We're really coming into alignment with what's in the IRC model code with some extras to make sure that we have a safe, balanced ventilation system. So, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I would like to go through the significant changes. We can go through these, would propose to go through them and then come back to the one public comment after we've gone through, and also at any point if members of the board wish to ask questions, the division would be happy to answer those. Thank you. Mr. Chair, is it okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So item number one is about duct installation. There's a reference on, and this has to do with dryer exhaust duct, about how you seal that ductwork. Where a change in the model code created a conflict about saying that you could and could not use duct tape on dryer exhaust duct. We're maintaining current Oregon requirements for for the discharge duct from dryers to have it sealed with tape, not having screws or any protrusions into it. That is item number one. Item number two, new model code language that really gives 4 ways of how to install domestic cooking exhaust equipment. It really clarifies the differences between different types of exhaust equipment, including when a combination microwave range hood is used. really no impact on cost. It just is clarifying to avoid questions of what happens with different types and fashions of exhaust from your range. Item number 3, exhaust discharge. This was brought forward to provide some alignment with the mechanical, commercial mechanical code and structural code. These have allowed for the use of recirculating hoods above kitchen equipment when there is continuous exhaust available from the kitchen itself. A lot under current code, people such as who are going through, say, the passive house program and have a central energy recovery ventilator and continuous exhaust out of the kitchens would always have to ask for a local alternate method in order to use this. So the proposal passed forward by the committee is to allow the recirculating hoods when there is that continuous exhaust in the kitchen and there is an ability to have, meeting the natural ventilation definition, an operable window or door in that kitchen space so that if someone does have, say, a burnt bacon on their stove, they can get additional ventilation. Item number 4, makeup air dampers. This has to do with kitchen exhaust systems as well. The dampers, the model code language originally was requiring that if you had a very large kitchen exhaust hood, you had to provide makeup air with an interlocked mechanical damper to allow that air in. This is now allowing the use of gravity dampers in addition to that. So that is a potential cost savings. They added that clarification in the 2018 code. Item number 5, here we are about whole house ventilation. It affects 3 sections. As passed by the committee, or forwarded by the committee, it does require, per the same as model code, whole house ventilation does run. It does require the system to be balanced so that there's a fan pushing in equal to what is being pulled out. Under section 1505.4.3, there is the exception to allow for a balanced and distributed system to have a 30% reduction. This is a proposal that has been accepted under the 2021 IRC. There were comments approved by the committee to clarify that they wanted additional language to point to the energy code in section 303.4. And they also added language that if you're using one of the exceptions for distributed, that operation of a central furnace can be through either a thermostat or other approved controller. Excuse me. Thank you. Item number 6 is for rooms with water closets, bathing facilities, or spa facilities. Currently, there's a requirement for having the time switch or humidistat for rooms where you have bathing facilities. There was a proposal at the model code level to add this requirement for half baths. The change would require that a room with a water closet would also have a timed switch, which would allow people to avoid leaving fans on and have automatic operation or automatic shutdown. Item number 7, under joint seams and connections, typical duct construction in Oregon has pretty much moved to the use of mastic sealing, not just tape alone, for joints and connections. This is now getting rid of the use of tape, or only for connections to pieces that need to be modified. You know, if you have to add a air handler connection. And an Oregon amendment has been rescinded. Really, all joint seams do need to have mastic sealing to provide less leakage and get more air to where it needs to be. The last of these significant changes, item number 8 about installation. This ties into some of the energy proposals, but it puts in the language in the mechanical installation section instead of energy. We find that things get lost when a mechanical contractor needs to know about installation, and this is saying that requiring that supply and return duct needs to be installed within the thermal envelope in accordance with Chapter 11, which has an exception for ductwork that is deeply buried in insulation. This aligns with really some of the prescriptive requirements under the Zero Energy Ready Home program. And with that is the 8 major mechanical items that are before you. I'm available for questions, and also there is a noted public comment for item number 5. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Mark?
This is Emily, through the chair. I don't have any questions for Mark or for the staff. I kind of have a procedural question. In our help sheet, it indicates that there are several people who are signed up for oral testimony, but it doesn't specify mechanical or energy. I understand that in the main documentation, there's one listed piece of testimony, but I'm a little bit confused if we're expecting any more people to comment on mechanical provisions in particular.
Correct. David?
Thank you, Chair. Hammer, Hulat, and board members. The appropriate time, but I'm speaking for the Zero Coalition, who did bring proposals to the Code Committee for consideration. At that time, that was just on energy, but subsequently we did submit some written testimony for this meeting on this section after having to review it after the Code Committee meeting. And part of that was to try and create consistency between the recommendation that was made for HRVs to become an additional measure in the additional measures table, while simultaneously, it's not written here in the mechanical code, but part of the mechanical code is related to the fact that in addition to balance, which the Zero Coalition thinks is great, it also had a requirement for heat recovery ventilation unless this 30 production was used. Our proposal discusses the
we cannot do that.
Can you hear me now? Ready?
Yes.
This is the next one. So the Zero Coalition did supply a written testimony for this meeting that does have a proposal about revising the mechanical ventilation as suggested in regards to removing the heat recovery ventilation requirement, which is related to the balanced ventilation proposal, because the Code Committee recommended that HRV ventilation be added to the additional measures table. Therefore, having it be a requirement and measures table seemed to lead to confusing results. So that was one issue around this, and part of that issue was also about staying the full ventilation rate for outside air to be supplied to the home, rather than allowing for the reduction to have 30% less fresh air. And our rationale on that was that keep the code in line with those goals of equivalency to the Zero Energy Ready program. They don't have the 30% reduction. And I believe in the written material, there's a testimony from the U.S. Department of Energy about that. Then separately, since the committee meeting, we also, during the smoke event, wrote up a proposal that said, since the code would now pull the air from a known location, which is great, it could be a great time to add additional protections to that by filtering the incoming air. If you look at our proposal, you can see that there was written materials there referring back to the mechanical code. Subsequently, I've learned we don't need to refer to the mechanical code on the location of an air intake. That's already covered. Great to know. But we still would like to propose for your consideration that incoming air be filtered before it enters the home. I think that the recent smoke event and the ever-increasing likelihood that we're going to have a lot more smoke events makes it a great time to consider filtering that air before it comes in the home, because during the smoke event, anyone who had an outdoor air supply to their home was instructed to shut that down during the smoke event. If we have the chance to make these systems work during smoke events or other times when there's poor air quality, it seems like it would be great to add that consideration right now. From a cost standpoint, we did indicate in our proposal you can add a filter box to that incoming fresh air around $100 of material cost, and I don't think the labor costs would greatly go up either. So those are the two things around mechanical that I just wanted to point out were in our written testimony. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any discussion? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I also signed up for oral testimony on agenda item 7B, similar to our testimony on 7A. We support the package brought forward to your board by the technical committee. We think it's important. In our written testimony, we asked for consideration of delayed implementation on two specific measures: the ducts inside and air sealing. And like I mentioned during structural, after further consideration, we realized that the delaying specific items in the package impacted the package as a whole and would result in in really an unacceptable new code for the period of time that was implemented. So we'd like to withdraw that. We are interested still in getting some relief and some opportunity to train. And would definitely support an extended grace period time if implementation could occur April 1, and either code could be used for the next 6 months. That would be a great relief for the industry and opportunity for us to train on how to properly implement these systems. And I'll just speak quickly to ducts inside. My company made that transition years ago. We had significant consulting from third-party firms to help us through that. It still took us a couple years to accomplish that. It is complex. If we're going to rely on actually putting the ducts in the space between floors, then we have structural considerations to make. We tried open web floor joists. Those were very noisy and for a different reason every time, very difficult to track down. We shifted to engineered floor joists, which work considerably better, but it requires coordinating with the design team, with the designer of the joists, to specify areas where holes can be drilled, spacing for the holes, sizing for the holes, and so forth. And then rolling back to your HVAC contractor, not only to change their duct design, but to train their personnel on where it's acceptable to drill, where not to, getting them equipped with those large arbor drills in order to be able to drill those holes properly. I don't think that I appreciate deep bury being an option in there. I can't see us wanting that for the benefit of our consumers as the go-to method. I still would be interested to see how that works under floor. I'm not sure it would. So serving the first floor would mean dropping a supply from the upstairs in multiple locations. In our experience, balancing a ducts inside system requires us to run separate supplies for the upstairs and the downstairs if we're going to be able to effectively damper and balance that. There's a lot of holes in the floor. We just want to have the opportunity, as much time as we can get, to get the attention of those builders that haven't been doing it previously, and get them the tools they need to do it properly to serve our consumers and to avoid unintended consequences. our comments on air sealing are similar. It's certainly easier. It just packages better with the ducts inside. So beyond that, we certainly support the package, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any more discussion?
Thank you, Chair. Mike, I just wanted to let you know that around the ducts inside training that we mentioned earlier in the previous section, NEA has actually, Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, taken up the ducts inside training from 10 years ago, and that's now being put online. So just so you know, that could be circulated through the builder community, design community, code committee. I believe those have already started going out through webinar and what do they call it, asynchronous training. So there are going to be resources available like right now and in the coming weeks and months that can help get the true version of ducts inside, which I think is what you're talking about, which does require changes to be made versus the deeply buried ducts, which doesn't supply as much savings, right? And isn't delivering the same level of savings as the ducts inside. Just want to put that out there for the new. That's already in the works, and the more folks that the quicker the industry can get educated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. More discussion?
Through the chair, this is Eli. It looks like we have a couple more public comments coming.
We have Tony is going to do some presenting major changes in energy, so we can have more oral testimony.
Okay, thank you. Well, so then I guess that's right. Thanks for reminding me we're just focused on mechanical. So I'd just like to share some thoughts on the whole house mechanical ventilation exception. I think it's pretty indicative that the Sam Raskin, the chief architect of the DOE program, felt compelled to provide testimony saying he doesn't think that's a good idea. If our goal is the zero energy ready equivalent, I think we need to stick with the current ventilation standard. If we do this exception, I think we're going to add confusion to the marketplace. All the above builders have been doing this for years, have not been using this exception. I respect that building science experts are chiming in and it's being looked at the international, at the IRC level. But I don't know that we should take action on something, especially if it doesn't come about, or I just don't know if there's data, or if there is, I would like to see it about why we should do it. I fear that we would proceed if we include this exception and then get to a point where we might have to reverse course and eliminate it when we go to 2023 if we are truly sticking with the zero energy ready and they're maintaining the current ASHRAE 62.2 standard. I also like the idea of doing away with HRV or ERV requirements. It seems like it's not really much of a requirement if most homes are not going to be doing it. If a home has a ducted system, it's not required. And my understanding is about 75 or 80% of homes that are being built have ducted systems, so therefore would not have the HRV. So I like the recommendation to remove the exception for the reduced airflow and to also not make HRVs a requirement. And I would be happy to talk about that when we get to the energy section as well, about why that might make sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
Through the chair, if you'd like a little clarification about the whole house ventilation and ventilation under the ZERH program, I'd just like to make one quick clarification on that. The executive, if Mr. Chair, is it acceptable? Mr. Mark Heizer with the division. Just to clarify about whole house ventilation and the ventilation requirements under 62.2 are not related to the executive order and executive order 1720 in the ZERH program. There are a lot of things in the ZERH program that are unrelated to energy, and things such as requiring kick-out flashing. They require low VOC paints, low VOC carpets, a lot of things like that, as actually in some original discussions with both Oregon Department of Energy and the Federal Department of Energy. We were making it clear that the executive order was having us try to come to the equivalent energy performance of that standard. We're very much in line with what is going through at the model code level for the IRC. And actually, Oregon goes a little bit above and beyond the IRC on that. So just wanted to clarify and stay out of the executive order portion on the ventilation. Thank you.
Yeah, Eli, again, through the chair. I guess I would ask if there is any information or evidence that demonstrates that the board, that Building Code Division can share that demonstrates air quality is not impacted if we reduce it. I understand the benefits of distributing it throughout the house, but you know, at this point, I've had a long experience, you know, accessing the 62.2 2010 materials than anything else. And I'm thinking about, you know, the safety and health and safety of the consumer, and ventilation is also, you know, for dealing with moisture and pollutants in the home. So, is there any information that can be shared today that can help convince us that distribution throughout the house delivers the same benefits at a reduced airflow as the 62.2 airflow?
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division. Yes, I can sort of give a piece on this. So ASHRAE 62.2 sort of sets a baseline with a balanced and distributed ventilation system. They make you add additional air, sort of put more on top if you don't distribute it and if you don't balance it. So they give you credit for reducing from an exhaust-only system down to a balanced and distributed system. The IRC starts with sort of at the worst case with the exhaust only. And so if the IRC is giving you credit for distributing and balancing that air. So instead of raising the bar from exhaust only, it's just reversing the starting point. So if you did exhaust only, you had to move more air under 62.2. Under the IRC, you start with the worst case and are allowed to reduce for the better quality systems. There are multiple studies that we would be happy to share that show how much better homes get as you move from either just no ventilation or exhaust only ventilation and then move on to as you move on to balanced and then distributed. The very work that ASHRAE 62.2 put into their code was of allowing of making a distributed and balanced system the best one was based upon the very work from Joe Stiebrick and the Building America program. So, and the proposal that was passed by the IRC in 2018 for the 2021 IRC was put forward by Dr. Joe Stiebrick, and so really this was a well-considered pathway to maintain equivalent ventilation safety. So an exhaust-only system is sort of the model code baseline, and they allow you to do less once you make sure that the air is distributed better. It is coming from work from the Building America program, Building Science Corporation, and others, and that was the basis for the proposal that was passed by the IRC. So we are confident in the work and studies that went behind this at the model level. Thank you.
Eli, again, thank you, Mr. Heizer. I guess I'd just like to throw it out to my fellow board members to see what people are thinking. Do you have any thoughts one way or another? It's still pretty strong in my mind that Sam Raskin submitted that testimony and that the Zero Energy Coalition, which represents a bunch of above-code program and green building and building science folks have also have that same opinion. So I'm a little stuck here. I'm curious what other people are thinking.
Through the chair, this is Emily. I feel a little stuck too. I think this is a pretty complicated issue. It's very specific. It's very technical, and it's also clear to me that it involves some dynamics that have to do with the energy code. I also, in agreement with Eli, and I think it's notable that Sam Rashkin weighed in, particularly since the Executive Order 1720 specifically references the DOE VRH standard. And so that this is coming from the DOE and they created the standard, I think it is notable. So, and I do appreciate the subcommittees and the staff's attention to this issue in the proposal. But I do, like I said, I think it's pretty highly technical, and so I'm feeling a little bit stuck right now.
Anybody else? Any discussion there? Can we move to the energy portion so we can, I think they are kind of related. Tony, can you give us some presentation of the major changes in the energy?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark Heizer for the division. We'll be going through, like the last section, I'd like to start out with just sort of a general introduction to what happened for these. We were looking to, as noted, Executive Order 1720 wants us to move toward the ZERH program energy equivalence by 2023. Would like to note that in the through the 2023 code cycle, we will be working with all of the stakeholders. Again, further discussions on top of what we originally, the Oregon Department of Energy and the Building Codes Division did have early discussions with the ZERH program people, including Sam Rashkin earlier. Want to thank everyone on the ORSC because our 2017 code is already ahead of the 2018 model code provisions. Any work happening here today is going to continue to move Oregon forward as one of the top states in the country. You've continued to do the right thing. We have a very good, simple, well thought out energy code. We are trying to keep this moving forward to meet the ZERH, but also keep good, consistent statewide application. The work that's being done is borne out through a recent pair of residential code compliance reports that NEA has done. Oregon's construction in noncompliance is just really incredible. It's 1/15 that happens in Washington State. Just bears out that our code really does well. Want to note that one thing that we wanted to put forward this code cycle was to try to, at least for this one, simplify the additional measures path. We were having a lot of feedback and push from building officials knowing which of the additional measures table that we're all familiar with would go with which one. We did some outreach, met with Energy Trust of Oregon and NEA in 2019 to put forward that we were going to have essentially one set of measures to pick from to make things easier. that we could avoid any overlap. That was one of the big requests of the division, to make sure that, A, if you did a second measure, that the programs that give incentives could incentivize, say, going with an additional measure. So what we have is trying to come back and within the proposal that you're going to see, were more or less what was approved and put forward by the committee was taking what had been one of the optional measures and really making it mandatory. It was under the prescriptive path. That was bringing both the ducts inside that we've mentioned earlier, having all of the ductwork well sealed, and also adding the additional air sealing to the home, something that we've talked about in prior code cycles about getting top plate sealing of the wall to ceiling area. That was discussed, I believe, in the 14 and the 17 cycles. Bringing that in, a lot of builders were doing this path, getting them used to doing it. It brings down the air sealing substantially. And then reworking the additional measures to get as close as possible in the equivalency of those measures, but also to provide a lot of options for all home types, regardless of fuel or how you heat or cool the home, giving everybody a chance to do an additional measure. And then also bringing in a few other things that really were part of the ZERH, really prescriptive home, which included windows and a few other pieces that you'll see in our discussions here. That's really the kickoff on what happened and what's before you now. We can go through the list. I believe the one I have printed out of the significant changes actually starts with a number 2. Is that correct, Mr. Chair? Just to let people know there's not a missing number.
Okay.
With number 2, again, it's about a scoping that we are using one additional measure from the revised table, but bringing one of the measures from the old table and putting all of those pieces in under a prescriptive mandatory. Item number 3 is a change. The ZERH program has a requirement for U factors of 0.27 on windows, down from our current 0.30. This is making it to where we're beginning that alignment with the ZERH program on there to get equivalency there. Within the table itself, table N1101.1 paren 2, the additional measures table, these have been massaged and to get to more current efficiency factors, redone to make sure that we don't have to say measure 1 can't be used with measure 5, so that there's not an overlap, so that the incentive programs could give incentives for more than one measure. There were 2, as part of the committee, they did add 2 options. One was to allow a credit for glazing areas as measured relative to the floor area of not less than 12% of the conditioned floor area, and also an additional measure if the home was air leakage tested to 3 ACH 50 and included a whole house energy recovery system. The first edition, we can take questions on those. We have not been able to fully analyze those relative to the efficiency of the ones that we had pre-modeled. Item number 5, which is about air leakage. This primarily, the major change is the requirement for top plate sealing. Again, this has been discussed in front of the boards in past code cycles. It is shown to reduce the air leakage of homes anywhere from 1.5 to 1 whole air change reduction. This is the one actual construction change. What we've done is moved some of the language about and clarifying what is a continuous air barrier, and we have brought in an air sealing table that is really is included in both the IRC and in the ZRH Energy Star programs to show people what or where you would normally want to look and make sure that your air sealing is properly done. The committee approved adding this work, but also asked that due to the fact that there are some methodologies for air sealing that aren't under the typical prescriptive methodologies that you would find under the IRC table, to allow an option of doing a blower door test to showing not less than 4 air change 50. So they took that air leakage, they accepted adding the top plate sealing, but wanted to allow sort of an alternate path as well to do a blower door test. Item number 6 is about the insulation of ducts. This is really some clarification about ducts inside the thermal envelope and need to have their insulation to 8. I'm sorry, my printout is a little awkward here. And we also have on the installation of the ducts, bringing in a conglomeration of really what is in the ZERH program and the National Association of Home Builders and other programs on what ducts inside looks like. The committee approved the amendments by consolidating the sections for clarity. So really what had been about the insulation and installation of the ducts were brought in, and the committee also discussed the application in naturally ventilated crawl spaces. Item number 8, for ventilation fan efficiency, we have had a requirement in the 2017 for bathroom exhaust fans to be Energy Star certified. This has been updated to also require the intake fans also be Energy Star certified. Item number 9, heat recovery ventilators. This is adding in the requirement for heat recovery ventilators to have an efficiency we looked at of not less than 1.2 CFM per watt. That's the total fan energy used for the intake and exhaust fan, and a heat recovery of not less than 66%. These were aligning with what was in the ZERH program, with a slight increase in the efficiency for the heat recovery to align with what we were seeing was available in the market. The committee approved the language as modified by clarifying that the exception applies with or without the furnace blower. The intent is that, yes, the heat recovery ventilator is independent of the furnace. There are public comments from Mike Moore, who also happens to be, I believe, the chair of the ASHRAE 62.2 committee now. Unfortunately, the language that we used aligning with the ZERH program could use some updates to make sure that it aligns with the latest nomenclature and standards used for heat recovery ventilators, but currently the language is in alignment with the ZERH program. Item number 10, service hot water pipe insulation. This is bringing in language that's been in the model codes, I believe, since 2012. It's a requirement to make sure that the first 8 feet into and the first 8 feet out of the water heater are insulated. This is, a storage tank is the pipe going in and out is sort of a little radiator fins going out, and model code has had this for some time. It's catching up with model code just for those first 8 feet. Under item 11, solar ready provisions, we have some pieces on that, and Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Hi, this is Alana Cox, through the chair. I just wanted to jump in on Solar Ready really quickly and again reiterate our appreciation to the Code Committee and the board for the healthy discussion on this topic. And I just wanted to point out, as Tony noted up front, that we are going to be kicking off a reach code process, and kind of regardless of what the board chooses to do on Solar Ready today, I just wanted to commit that we're happy to continue to work on this and would invite all the commenters to consider reach code proposals as well, and continue the discussion, the great discussion we've been having so far. So I just wanted to throw that in on Solar Ready in particular. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Mark Heizer with the division, going through item 11. The information here is what was discussed and approved by the board for the from the September 16th meeting, and that is all for the actual significant matrix items. Again, turning it back over to the chair for questions and for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to Mike?
So through the chair, am I correct in assuming that everyone who was here to provide verbal public comment who did not comment on the mechanical proposals is here to comment on the energy provisions?
So we still have three testimony. I think they have in the list. They have the Lynch and David and I think that's four all testimony coming to comment. Again. Let's start with if you don't have any questions for, we can come back and if you have any questions for Mark. So we have, I have on the list, Lake with ODOA for all testimony, and I have David, he did one part, he still have the second part for the imaging, and I have Shilpa Sarama and Mike. So we'll start with that. Blake, if he's in Melbourne.
I'm here, yes. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Tamerled and members of the board. I also submitted written testimony, so I'm not going to go through that, and I trust that the board has had a chance to read that. And if you want to, you can go back and refer to it. So I'll keep my testimony pretty short, but just wanted to bring to the attention of the committee that our agency, the Oregon Department of Energy, supports the advancement of the energy efficiency provisions in the proposed code. We know that there's been some back and forth discussion around the progress that this current code gets related to some of the executive orders, 1720 and then 20-04, particularly with regard to the energy efficiency equivalent to the U.S. DOE Zero Energy Ready Home by 2023. And just wanted to bring to the board's attention that we've started a pretty robust code stakeholder committee. We've been hosting meetings, co-hosting meetings with DCD and DCD staff over the summer. Had a really great round of discussion with regard to some of the energy modeling inputs for the 2006 baseline for EO 2004, and we really look forward to continuing that discussion with the various code stakeholders to kind of align and get consensus around the assumptions that go into the modeling to document and demonstrate progress toward meeting the executive orders. And just exactly where we are with this code, and then where we might need to get to with some of the future code cycles. So we think the prescriptive code components of this proposal certainly will improve the energy efficiency of new homes, and look forward to working more with DCD and other stakeholders in the future to document progress and analyze where this code gets us for executive orders. Thank you.
Thanks. Members, do you have any question for Blake this time? David?
Thank you, Chair Tamara Hulett and board members. Again, I'm here representing Zero Coalition, which is a group of architecture and design, engineering, construction firms and professionals, plus some local governments in Oregon. And our goals really are around advancing energy efficiency and best practice between now and 2030. And we really view the governor's 2 executive orders as just guideposts to help achieve those goals for Oregon. So I did just want to touch on, this. I don't think anybody who's been involved in this year's process of updating the code really thinks that it was the optimal way. The past administrator last October said that he was going to shake it up, and this time around the division was going to vote first, and then people would get a chance to react to that proposal. And I think it's unfortunate that we're talking about some of the details here at this meeting, but I think we're just trying to get a chance to vote. So thanks for that opportunity. And I think to boil things down, back on June 9th when you met to discuss the whether or not to go forward with examining this proposal, I actually testified on behalf of Zero to say, hey, you might as well just adopt what the division has put in front of you. 2020, by that point, had already been a crazy year with 2 months of everyone staying at home or limiting their work schedules due to the pandemic. And so that was our recommendation at the time. But with the moving forward of the code proposal, we did manage to participate with the code committee, and I really want to thank the code committee for the work that they did, and especially for co-chair Whitehill, who actually enabled us to submit a proposal for that meeting on the 25th, because there was no formal opportunity to submit proposals to the code committee, as they were just looking at the division proposal. So that proposal was a little late in being delivered, though, and there was limited opportunity for it to be examined and analyzed by committee members, which is really the reason that it was brought back again to this meeting, so that there was a hope that there could be a bit more full discussion around it. Additionally, with the information that we were able to provide in the written testimony about how much savings might come from these additional measures, what the cost of these additional measures might be, which would all be part of more of a traditional code proposal process. So, we appreciate that. And I do want to be clear, today, Zero still believes that adopting the division proposal as is certainly better, than not moving forward with a code proposal this year. But, we don't think that anybody here, wants to do nothing this year. And so we just want to reiterate what we said on the 9th. Like, hey, moving forward with this proposal would be better than not moving forward at all. We just think that there are a couple weaknesses that we tried to point out in the written testimony. Again, one of them being, if you're going to have a requirement, and we'll really get to the exceptions. So one exception to the HRV requirement, where about 80% of homes that have central ductwork would not have to use the HRV, but the other 20% would. It doesn't seem so much like a requirement, it just seems more like an option, and that's why we were suggesting it's just an option table. And then that exception for the deeply buried ducts, as Mike talked about, deeply buried ducts don't deliver the same performance as actually getting ducts inside. I know that the Zero Energy Ready standard allows for deeply buried ducts, but they also require the ducts to be tested for tightness, which would actually really make sure that they are performing even when they're up there in the attic under insulation. I think it's going to talk about an amendment that would address that duct tightness issue. But that exception was another thing that seemed to be potentially lessening the impact of what the code was proposed to deliver. So, again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for David at this time? Next, Sharon Falk. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity here to testify on behalf of NIA. I am testifying. NIA wrote a written testimony, bringing forward a court proposal on specific exceptions to the installation of ducts related to ducts deeply buried in insulation. NIA is dedicated to accelerating both electric and gas energy efficiency, leveraging its regional partnerships to advance the adoption of energy-efficient products, services, and practices. And we also support advancement of codes in the Northwest. BCB's proposal for the 2021 code was approved with few amendments by the Technical Code Review Committee on August 25th. BCB's proposed 2021 code introduces prescriptive requirements in the code, such as whole house mechanical ventilation, bringing the ducts inside, increasing the stringency of the U value of the windows, which was brought forward by the division. Although these measures introduced in the code bring additional savings over the 2017 code, we believe these savings are not enough to avoid needing a big jump in savings in the 2023 Oregon Code to keep Oregon Code on track to meet the goals of the Executive Order 17-20, which require newly constructed residential buildings to achieve equivalent performance levels with the U.S. DOE Zero Energy Ready Home version 6 specifications, which we refer as DOZER. NIA's proposal here for the board addresses this issue by introducing duct leakage testing requirements, which can bring additional energy savings to the proposed 2021 code. A major source of potential savings within the proposed BCD 2021 code is the requirement that ductwork be placed inside the heated envelope, referred as ducts inside. While the duct inside requirement can deliver savings, the deeply buried exemption of burying the ductwork under R19 insulation with no air tightness testing requirements will do little to ensure leakage from the system is not lost into the attic, thus significantly reducing the savings that would otherwise be achieved. As deeply buried ducts are not equivalent to the ducts inside condition space, we are recommending that the code require duct leakage testing to set limits to the leakage to the outside. To bring the proposed code closer to achieve equivalent performance to DOZER version 6 requirements, our proposal introduces duct leakage testing requirements be set not to exceed 3 CFM per 100 square feet of conditioned floor area tested at 25 pascals and verified through third-party testing. Setting the requirements for duct leakage testing can bring approximately additional 2 to 3% energy savings to the proposed BCD code. Field data collected through contractors indicate that the duct testing does not exceed $150 per dwelling unit. We did run rate modeling analysis to evaluate the cost savings for this proposal, which is approximately $45 annually and can hit a simple payback of less than 3.5 years. We believe duct leakage testing is a common practice with program builders, and there are many subcontractors out there with the expertise to help train and update the builders' common practices. NIA partners with organizations across the state to provide technical assistance and training on current and upcoming energy codes. Training attendees include design and construction professionals, building officials, plan examiners, home builders, field inspectors. Introducing testing requirements in the 2020 code will help prepare the market in the next 2 years to achieve equivalent performance levels to DOZER version 6 by 2023. With that, I would like to thank the board members for providing me an opportunity to testify today. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Shiv by this time? The next one is Mike.
Thank you, Chair Tamerhulet and the board. I believe I jumped ahead a little bit with my testimony under the mechanical section that applied to energy, and OHBA continues to support the package proposed by the division and brought forward by the committee and the other stakeholders that were involved. We are in a time of disruption of our industry. We have supply chain disruption. I personally have a house sitting right now waiting for exhaust fans, which is somewhat ironic. But we would appreciate the passage of the package today, and recognize the work going through by the committee. At the same time, we would appreciate consideration of additional grace period, whether both codes are available during that grace period, however the mechanics of that work out. We believe will provide us an opportunity to get tools in front of our builders and other partners to get tools in front of our builders to properly implement these systems. Ducts inside may be in a number of homes in Oregon already, but the implementation of doing that properly does take time, and there are structural challenges involved as well as mechanical challenges and energy challenges, we would like to make sure that that's implemented correctly. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions to the presenters?
Mr. Chair.
What?
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin Dwell of Northwest Natural. I was also planning to provide oral testimony.
Sorry, I didn't see your name yet.
Thank you. So thank you to the chair, members of the board, and division staff. For the record, this is Kevin Dwell, engineering consultant with Northwest Natural. Northwest Natural provides natural gas service to approximately 2.5 million people in more than 140 communities through 770,000 meters in Oregon and Southwest Washington, with one of the most modern pipeline systems in the nation. We're also a 162-year-old company delivering energy safely, reliably, and affordably every day while reimagining our future to integrate renewable natural gas into our system. Northwest Natural is a long-time supporter and contributor to Energy Trust of Oregon and the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, both of which advance energy efficiency in our region and beyond. Additionally, we've taken a lead role in a building industry-wide collaboration to bring high-efficiency gas-fired heat pump technology to market. Energy efficiency is a critical element of our strategy to drive down emissions, decarbonize our pipeline, and help the region meet its climate goals. Northwest Natural also supports approval of the proposed 2021 residential energy efficiency code provisions as recommended by the Code Review Committee. The updates represent significant improvements to the code and keep it on a trajectory to address the climate imperative. Oregon's residential code is and continues to be among the best in the U.S., has high compliance rates, is cost-effective, and is fair-handed in continuing to provide energy flexibility and resiliency, as well as energy choice for all Oregonians. Northwest Natural has been actively involved in the code update process, which we believe has been effective in developing and advancing the code. We encourage BCD to continue a process that is open and allows for ample opportunities for input from the public and industry stakeholders alike. Additionally, we support an open and collaborative approach to the development of REACH code. We look forward to working together with BCD, its boards, and industry stakeholders to maintain Oregon's leadership in advancing energy codes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, members, we have a proposal here for mechanical and energy. We thank the committee for doing a great job. It's open for discussion right now. And for a motion to adopt or amend or reject, so for yours.
Chair Tamerholt, this is John Camiller. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the proposal as presented with the amendment that we delay the implementation or extend the grace period until October from July, with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public or necessary to conserve scarce resources. Thank you.
Do we have a second motion? The motion?
Chair, this is Rich Fry. I second that.
Discussion, any discussion?
Thank you, Freddie. You read my mind. This is Eli. So, just like to share some comments. First off, thank you for the public testimony. It's much appreciated. One thing I'm a little disappointed that we're not seeing is a comparison of the energy performance to where we're trying to get, to where the zero energy ready standard is at. So how much do we have left? What I can look at is the prescriptive requirements of the zero energy ready home. And that includes the HRV in every home, no exceptions for airflow. It's 2 air changes per hour tested. If the ducts are in the attic, it needs 1.5 inches of spray foam, and they need to be tested. There's a benchmark sizing factor, so larger homes need to demonstrate higher performance. So I'm really curious. I'm happy where we're at. I think it's a good incremental step. I love it that industry and above code folks and folks are really supporting higher level of performance are generally in agreement. I think that's great. But I think what we're missing is how much left do we have to go. So we're 1 week shy of 3 years from when we need to be implementing the zero energy ready equivalency. So I'm hoping that the Construction Industry Energy Board can dive into this and look at the assumptions and find agreement. I appreciated Blake's testimony with Odo's involvement, and so hopefully we can get a little bit more information and transparency at the board level. We can understand where we're at and how much we have left to go. Regarding the OHBA request for delay, I think Mike made some great points regarding the ducts inside. Both Mike and Shilpa addressed some of the shortcomings of the buried ducts. I think we all agree that that's not an ideal solution that's going to deliver the same performance. OHBA is really committed to helping builders achieve true ducts inside. I think that's great, and I think that potentially warrants an extension. The last thing is I would offer a friendly amendment to the table to remove the exception for the reduced airflow and remove the HRV requirement. And I understand that it's going to potentially tiny notch in energy performance, but what it's going to do is allow us to maintain continuity with all the builders that have been doing above code homes through various programs. It aligns with all the programs out there, LEED, Energy Star, Earth Advantage, recognizing Building America is a separate thing, and they might be really onto something. I'd rather stick with the majority of what we've been doing, what builders are used to. And finally, on the level of affordability, a lot of entry-level homes or Habitat for Humanity type homes are getting built with a ductless heat pump. Under the current proposal, they're going to be required to do a heat recovery ventilator, and meanwhile, 3/4 of the other homes are not going to have to do it because they're ducted systems. So from an affordability standpoint, I think it's worth it. I'll just reference a ventilation study that the Washington State Energy Extension Office did a number of years ago. They compared ventilation systems in number of homes, dust only, supply only, balance, and HRVs, and they found that the HRV systems generally didn't perform very well because they were commissioned wrong. They were not installed and tested properly, and so I think we take some incremental steps. We stick with ASHRAE 62.2, 2010, and just that level of requirement. We don't require the HRV. I think that's a great idea. That's going to help builders. It's going to help affordability. We're taking a good step in the right direction, and recognizing that we are going to be moving the bar significantly at the next level, too, to get to the zero energy ready. So I'll just end that. I would put the friendly amendment that we remove the exemption for the mechanical ventilation exception for reduced airflow, and that we also remove the requirement for HRVs or ERVs.
And I will add to that. I agree with what Eli just said, and I think I would seek to just provide some clarification in my comments on what he said. So I think, Eli, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you said is the friendly amendment would apply both to what we discussed with the mechanical provisions as well as the energy provisions. The mechanical provisions reference the note that Sam Rashkin submitted, and the energy provisions are referencing N1105.7. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, also David, this is essentially what you've discussed in your Zero Coalition letter under bullet number 5. Is that correct?
I'll respond, Emily, through the chair. I'm pulling up our presentation, our written testimony, and yeah, in number, when I click on something else, in number 5, points on ventilation, that was our description, the 30% reduction. Okay, I got to lean closer. Yes, you're right, Emily. It was point number 5 in the written testimony that was provided by the Zero Coalition, and that details the elements in the code where the changes would come into effect. So it's section 1105.5, and relating to the addition of the heat recovery ventilator in the additional measures table, and 1101.12.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. I just thought I would mention that for the rest of the board. As we were talking about it and we finally put the pieces together, I found that section of the public testimony to be fairly helpful. And then I also just want to close my comments by saying I'm actually kind of surprised that nobody on the board has latched on to the fiscal impact in energy provision and 1105.7. That is a potentially large cost increase. So I think that if we would consider adding this friendly amendment, we might actually then not require the potentially large cost increase, while at the same time solving a couple of problems that make sense from a mechanical ventilation standpoint.
Adding an amendment to the motion, correct? The motion without any amendment. So are you asking for the amendment to the motion?
I think Eli. That's what I asked for. Yes.
So again,
so this is Eli. I'm asking for an amendment to the motion on the table that we remove the exception under R303.4 whole house mechanical ventilation. I'm sorry, it's M1505.4.3. That we remove the exception allowing for a 30% reduction in ventilation for distributed whole house ventilation systems, and that we also remove bear with me, section N1105.7 heat recovery ventilator requirements. The second one is item 9 under energy in 1105.7 heat recovery ventilator. So currently, as it requires a heat recovery ventilator in every home. The exceptions, if the home has central ducted system, that they can run it at a reduced rate and be exempt from requiring a heat recovery ventilator. And so that essentially allows 3/4 of the homes being built right now approximately to not have a heat recovery ventilator. So it seems like we're not gaining a lot. The logic is we're saving energy by not exhausting, we're not creating as many air changes, reduced airflow, so that you don't need heat recovery. That's the basis for the current proposal. I think we should stick with the ventilation standard that does not allow for reduced airflow, that Energy Star, LEED, Earth Advantage, a lot of these homes have been using and that our builders are used to, and that we also do not require the expense of the heat recovery ventilator for homes that do not have central ducted systems. And I just a comment I said earlier, I recognize that it's going to result in a little bit of a loss of energy savings. However, I think it's a good incremental step that's going to help us achieve ventilation systems that are going to function properly going forward. And that we'll likely see the heat recovery ventilation requirement come when we do the next code cycle to get that last step of performance to get the zero energy ready equivalent.
I know this is procedurally. The first motion has to accept the amendment, or what is the procedure? Mark or Tony?
Yeah, through the chair, this is Alana. That's correct. For a friendly amendment, Mr. Camiller would have to accept the amendment. Otherwise, you'd have to move on his motion and then consider another motion. And Mr. Heizer is available here if it's helpful as well to get if there are any questions on kind of the consequences of the changes that are being considered.
So let's start with Mark.
Thank you, Chair Tamela and the board, Mark Heizer with the division. Just to give a few pieces on this, a lot of the energy savings for the overall, for the all-electric homes comes from the addition of the heat recovery ventilator. And under the current code, there is a requirement for balanced ventilation, which is better than the minimum of the IRC. The affordable home would still be putting in an intake fan and an exhaust fan. They might still be using their bathroom fan, but the cost increase for the smaller affordable entry income home that's all electric would probably be buying a central unit that includes both the heat recovery unit and that is both a supply and an exhaust fan. So those costs are not that different, but by removing that from the code, that really affects a lot of the energy savings that were being counted on for some of the other home types beyond the majority central furnace type. So that is a bit of an issue for what will be reported. We are looking forward to coming in and, yes, getting agreement on what that ZERH target is and going through one more time with all of the stakeholders on what that is, and look forward to working with Odo and so forth for the next report. But we are, from just the general look of this will take back the weighted savings a pretty substantive amount. The exception, again, is just a reverse of what happens in 62.2. The IRC, you'd be allowed to reduce the better the system is, and under the ASHRAE 62.2, they make you put in more, going from worst to best system. So it's I believe there's some references to the work that was in Washington, and I believe that looked at the very work done by Building America that was part of the IECC code proposal. But just want to put that out for everyone on that. This is, again, over time, there will be that move to all ducts inside. There will be the move to energy recovery ventilators, but for the smaller homes and some of the different types that aren't in the standard program home would need those to get some movement forward in energy efficiency. Thank you.
So through the chair, so just to clarify, that sounds like a good chunk of savings for the majority of homes are going to be counted by not ventilating to the rate that is equivalent in the zero energy ready home, or that any above program is ventilating to.
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division, the ZERH program ventilation rates are set to a different code. They aren't part of the goals for recognized or determined under the executive order. It's using the accepted IRC ventilation tables instead, and yes, a safe ventilation rate and reducing ventilation, yes, any type of ventilation does have an impact on energy use. That is the reason for this exception, for providing the best possible ventilation distribution system recognized under ASHRAE 62.2, which is a distributed and balanced system, is the best system possible that you do get credit and are allowed to reduce the ventilation quantity, which will then provide additional savings under a safe system. Thank you.
Through the chair, though, Mark, isn't it, if we make these dual changes in the mechanical provisions and if we provide an amendment to remove the requirement for N1105.7, isn't it true that we might not be requiring that additional cost for some houses that, as it stands in the current proposal, would be required to bear that increased cost?
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division. Thank you. Board Member Kemper, there is a fair amount of cost is associated with the air intake duct and the air intake fan that would be required regardless under the proposal. So there is some regardless cost associated with that's outside of the heat recovery ventilator cost. So on smaller homes, they're currently off-the-shelf intake and exhaust heat recovery units that would serve as the intake fan as well as the exhaust fan. So when you weigh out the total difference between the cost of including the heat recovery ventilator for the all-electric home versus not including the heat recovery ventilator, there's not a significant increase, but a definite in installed cost, but a major impact on the energy savings at that point. Was just trying to point that out. In the off-the-shelf unit retails somewhere around $600, and then really the ductwork costs and the ductwork costs would be pretty much similar. But also, you would have to also consider the fact that, yes, there's an intake fan that would be needed if you remove the requirement for the heat recovery ventilator. So the major cost impact on this is for the smaller entry-level affordable all-electric home is not a great impact. For larger homes where you need a bigger unit, they can run upwards. A big heat recovery ventilator unit, and the ones that were noted as having problems in the past are, $1,500 to $3,000 units if they're going that method. Depending on this, really big home might hit that higher end number. So I hope that helped. If not, thank you.
That did help. Thank you, Mark.
One other question for the chair. This is Eli. If we do keep the HRV, ERV requirement, I think we need to address the public testimony that was submitted by Mike Moore in requesting clarification if it's sensible heat recovery or adjusted sensible heat recovery efficiency. I believe the zero energy ready home requires sensible recovery efficiency, and that's my assumption initially was that was the number that was going to be required since we're trying to achieve the equivalent performance. but Mike made some pretty good points in his letter too. So can anyone comment about what the efficiency level is in the current proposal that we are going to have?
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division. Yes, we took the language as closely as possible from the ZERH program. Believe it or not, Mr. Moore works down the hall from the administrators for who are contracted to take care of the ZERH program, and unfortunately he found out that they were never going to update, or anytime soon were going to update their sensible recovery efficiency to the new, I think it's average sensible recovery, ASRE, that's used by the Heating and Ventilation Institute. And we were hoping that he could work something out so we could get something from the ZERH program to help with this before we got to the final committee proposal. Nothing could get worked out. Mr. Moore did submit how to bring in some additional language that does align with what are true industry standards versus what is listed in the federal Zero Energy Ready Home Program language. It would provide a little more alignment with what is happening in industry to bring in those standards, but not 100% necessary, but it would provide a little more clarity for industry and for building officials.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I actually have a question for John Miller on the motion, if you don't mind. I believe in your motion you recommended a delay in implementation of 6 months, and I'm just asking if you can clarify, does that mean for all of the mechanical and energy provisions? Because even in, I believe, Mike Goodrich's submitted testimony, he only asked for a delay in implementation in 3 of the measures.
Just John Camella through the chair. That was, you'll have to ask Mike for a completely accurate interpretation, but I think that might have been their original suggestion, but they found out that actually then reduced the standard of the code for that period of time. So what I asked for under the structural, and what I'm suggesting we do here in a very similar manner, is increase the I'm losing the word, the period of implementation. So instead of it being required in July, that the code, the use of the code requirement be delayed until October. So both either code could be used in that time period. So it's essentially, there's already a grace period, that's the word. There's already a grace period from April to July, and we're suggesting just to extend it to October. That's what I intended my motion to indicate.
Okay.
And I have to say that I hear the technical testimony and the amendment to the motion, and I'm pretty confused. So if somebody could give some more perspective to the practical impact of that amendment to the motion, I'm happy to consider it, and I'm leaning towards considering it, but I don't quite understand what the result winds up being. Thank you.
Eli, through the chair, I think maybe this would be a good opportunity to ask Mike Goodrich or Terry Whitehill about their thoughts and any discussion that the committee had that might weigh in on this.
Is Terry Brown?
I'm not seeing it. Oh, yeah, there is. Yes. I'll start. Eli, we had significant conversation around this at the committee level. It was confusing then too, and we spent a lot of time bouncing back and forth between the mechanical and the energy provisions to try to come to a clear understanding of exactly what we're approving here. The committee obviously forwarded this version to you. Was their ultimate decision. When OHBA looked at it later in consideration of Zero's proposal, we agreed that the requirement for the HRV and then the exception seemed confusing. OHBA's concern was unintended consequences of tampering with that language at this late stage, and that's why we didn't. And to answer Board Member Kemper's question from earlier, our written testimony did ask for a 12 to 18 month delay of implementing certain measures, and on further research, Mr. Miller was correct. We learned that would actually weaken the code during that period of time, which we certainly did not want to do. So we would be very grateful for a 3-month extension of the grace period. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Mike. David, sorry, through the chair, David Heslin, one more time, if you don't mind, since I believe that your written testimony from the Zero Coalition represents the issue at hand in the clearest possible way. Do you think you could take a stab at just sort of summing the issue up for us?
To the chair and to answer your question, Emily, I can try. So, Board Member Miller, being confused about it was kind of the way that I left witnessing the committee activity, 6 weeks ago. Our attempt at revising this language was to try and provide what we thought was clearer and direction and fair application, in that HRVs wouldn't be required of any housing type, but they would be on the options table. And so with the friendly amendment that's on the table, I think the simplest way of describing it is the 30% reduction in outside air allowed for in the division proposal would go away. And so if we're talking, say, like a 2,000 square foot house, for instance, you, my numbers won't be perfect, right? But ASME 62.2 might say you have 50 units of fresh air coming in. The 30% reduction would have allowed you to knock that down, to 35 units of fresh air coming in. This would say, nope, we're going to stay with the 50 units of fresh air rather than allowing for the reduced due to the distributed delivery. So, and then since there was an exception for the heat recovery ventilation tied to this exception for lower levels of outside air, then the heat recovery ventilation requirement and the exception to that would both be removed from the energy code portion. And the heat recovery ventilation would just live on the options table tied to a higher level of air sealing. So I think that's as simple as I can describe it. There's a mechanical issue at play around what people believe is enough fresh air for air quality purposes. And then related to that, they're taking away the stated requirement for a heat recovery ventilator that had a huge exception associated with it, and instead just having the heat recovery ventilation be an option on the options table. Thank you.
Through the chair, this is John Miller. Mark Heizer, would you comment on the practical difference between having it as a requirement, as David just explained, a requirement with exception versus an option on the table. The division's view of what the practical difference might be.
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division and Board Member Miller. The impact or the practical applications are for many homes being recognized are using central furnaces, whether heat pump or gas furnace, with distributed systems. The effect is that there would be greater energy use through ventilation impacting those homes versus the energy use of those homes would go up significantly or as substantively based upon this. That it's just a matter of what's something that's running 24/7, 365 days a year. It just adds up. It's a little extra that the home has to heat and cool during other seasons. For looking at the overall homes, when you get to the all-electric homes that don't have central furnace distribution systems, the practical impact on those is that their energy use does go up a bit, and while saving having to put in a, say, central combined unit, their overall cost is not going up that much. So when we get to the result of reporting, when we weight the average of all the units, we suddenly have people, as it's discussed, as an additional measure, we don't feel people are going to select this new additional measure on its own, and that they'll, there are a lot of other things that are already being done that most homes probably they'll look at the furnace or the water heater or some of the other, or at the reduction in windows, and that in 2023, this, or by 2026, is going to be back in for all homes in order to get the savings that we're going to need to show to the governor. We're a little concerned about how much this might take things actually backwards. Thank you.
If I can, through the chair, John, maybe I can just help simplify it too. After a 62.2 standard requires a certain amount of ventilation, like David said, let's use 50 CFM. Under just the regular standard as it stands, you can meet that with a single exhaust fan running at that 50 CFM, cubic feet per minute, 24 hours a day. The proposal on the table is saying you have distribution throughout the house, all the bedrooms and living areas and whatnot, that you don't need that 50 CFM, that you can use less air being distributed throughout the house because it's being distributed everywhere evenly, theoretically. So basically, there's energy savings by not running the fan as much, not not having as many air changes in the hour, and thus the requirement is if you're at that higher level, you don't have distribution throughout the house. You have to have heat recovery on the ventilation. So that's hopefully that helps a little bit.
John Camillo, through the chair, that does explain it. One thing that Mark said that I'd like further clarification. I think there's both sides from a energy use and a cost, but what Mark said at the very end of his comment was that the concern is that adopting the amendment to the motion might result in not meeting the governor's mandate, and that that could be a concern. What would be the practical result of that? Would that then require the whole code to come back, or what happens if if there's a technical shortfall in meeting the governor's mandate. I don't know a better way to say it. Sorry.
Yeah, this is Eli. If I can respond to the chair, it's a great question. My first response is we don't know how close to that target we're at right now. We don't have any numbers put in front of us about what performance this proposal is getting to the zero energy equivalency. So that's a big. How much is left? My quick answer is the next code cycle, then heat recovery ventilation gets added in, and that gives builders years to first just learn about this whole house mechanical ventilation requirement. The program builders, they understand it. And the Energy Trust that serves customers of Pacific Power, Portland General Electric, Northwest Natural, they have about 30% market share in their service territory of builders that have been doing this. But still, a number of builders have never done mechanical in the whole house system. So what I'm suggesting is we let them learn kind of on the start and have everybody understand it without the requirement of heat recovery. And when we need to have this performance for October 1st, 2023, we're going to likely see heat recovery ventilation in every house. And maybe at that point, this Building America study is going to be the accepted standard. Maybe ASHRAE is going to change. Maybe the Zero Energy Ready home changes. But the testimony I see from Sam Rashkin, the guy that is over the entire Zero Energy Ready program, he's saying he doesn't think it's a good idea. And that carries a lot of weight in my mind.
So through the chair, while discussion is happening, I attempted to write down a language for a friendly amendment to the motion that we're discussing. I'm happy to say that if that's okay. Okay, so the friendly amendment that I wrote down is to remove M1505.4.3, which proposes to add an exception allowing for a 30% reduction in ventilation for distributed whole house ventilation systems, and also remove N1105.7, which requires an HRV, but in doing so, add the option for an HRV or an ERV to the table in N1101.1.
Mark, can you comment on this amendment?
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division, there wouldn't be the need for the last bit since there was a measured number 8 or 10 that has one option with an ERV on it. So there wouldn't be the need for that last bit, but
okay.
Those are at the will of the board. Thank you.
And through the chair, this is Alana at the division. I think Eli captured correctly kind of the issue in terms of compliance with the executive orders. There is nothing specifically in those 2 executive orders that's due this year. The question, other than Solar Ready, which you guys addressed at your last meeting, the question is really just how incremental to be. And so based on how big a jump we'll have to make in 2023. So there would be my understanding, and please anyone correct me if you think I'm wrong about this, is that, either direction would not violate the executive order. It's just a matter of how big of a jump we're going to need to make in 2023.
Thank you. Okay, we have John. You hear the funding. And yes, I think procedurally you have to accept or reject the amendment.
Through the chair, this is John. Through the chair, this is John Camiller, and I accept the amendment as proposed.
Okay.
Okay. Division. I'm sorry. This is Alana. Since they're kind of 2. To be clear, I think Eli made a friendly amendment, and then Emily summarized it. Eli, do you consider that summary to reflect your original friendly amendment, just more specifically?
Yes, she captured it.
Okay, just so we're clear here at the division, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Through the chair, procedurally, does anyone need me to repeat it? Or are we good? And
I think if you would like to make a, sorry, this is Alana from the division again. On the ERV side, being already captured in the table, if you're comfortable with that not being a necessary addition, but the rest of it would stand as you read it off, is my understanding. Is that staff? Does that sound right?
yes, it sounds like Mark. Thank you, Alana, through the chair. It sounds like Mark captured my concerns on the last bit of that. And just to be perfectly clear, I'm going to take what I wrote and copy it into the chat box for everyone so you can see it.
Through the chair, Rich Fry. Mike Goodrich, could you weigh in on that, why that wasn't in the committee's thoughts in the first place? I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that if you don't mind.
Boy, I can't tell you what was in the committee's thoughts at the time. You've heard from several people already, there was a lot of confusion around this particular issue, and we discussed it for a long time, went back and forth a couple times, and eventually, I don't mean to speak for the committee or others, but eventually I think that for the most part, we relied on the work that Mark Heizer from the division had already put in and the work groups that they created, and that it was a path that continued us along the path of meeting the goals in the executive order. So I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you. Through the chair, Rich Fry. So I seconded that original motion, and I still second that motion, even with the amendment.
Further discussion?
Sorry, this is Eli one more time through the chair. Are we going to consider extending the grace period an additional 3 months? That's the request I heard, and I didn't consider more discussion.
It is in the motion.
This is John. It's in the motion. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Through the chair, Rich Fry. I believe that was part of the original motion, was the extension of the grace period.
Yes.
Thank you. I missed that.
Further discussion? Okay, there is none. I think we're going to go to a roll call for vote.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Eli Volum.
Approve.
Emily Kemper.
Approve.
Rich Fry.
Approve.
John Camiller.
Approve.
Forrest Barnes.
Approve.
Gordon Anslow.
Approve.
Chair Reve Timmerhulo.
Approve.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, announcement. Any announcement from building codes?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you, none. Well, thank you, members, thank you, participants, and we come to the end of the meeting.
Sorry. RMSB's voting on something.
Go ahead. Thank you again, and we come to the end of the meetings. I'm acting chair, there is no further business. We come to the local meeting at 12:35. Thank you very much, and stay safe, and we hope to see you soon.